If I had known that night would end in sheer terror, I never would have taken the job. But at the time it seemed perfect. Easy money, a nice house, 2 quiet kids. The Robinsons were well off, living in an old but well-maintained house in Chestnut Hill, Philadelphia. It had that classic eerie charm, creaky wooden floors, antique furniture, and a basement door no one ever seemed to use. They were heading to a charity gala and needed someone to watch their kids, Ben, 8, and Lily, 6. Simple enough, right? When I arrived, Mrs. Robinson greeted me with the usual rundown: bedtimes, emergency numbers, snacks in the fridge. As she grabbed her coat, she hesitated. "Oh, one more thing," she said, lowering her voice. "If the kids mention anything weird, just ignore it. They have active imaginations." She smiled, but something about the way she said it put me on edge. I didn't think much of it until dinner. We were sitting at the dining table when Ben suddenly said, "He watches us at night." I looked up. "Who?" "The clown," Lily whispered, stabbing at her mac and cheese with her fork. I let out a small laugh. "Like a scary movie clown?" "No," Ben said. "The one in the hallway." I swallowed. That wasn't the answer I was expecting. "Guys," I said, keeping my voice light, "there's no clown here." Ben just shrugged. "He only comes out when adults aren't looking." Lily nodded, eyes wide. I forced a smile and changed the subject, but my nerves were shot. After dinner, I checked every room upstairs, even the dark hallway outside their rooms. Empty. It was just their imagination. Or at least that's what I told myself. That night, after putting them to bed, I curled up on the couch with my phone. The house was silent except for the occasional groan of the old wooden walls. I was mid-scroll when a notification popped up. A text. It was from Ben. "He's in the hallway again." My stomach dropped. I bolted upstairs, threw open their door, and found them huddled together on Ben's bed. "Where?" I whispered. Ben pointed at the doorway. He was standing right there. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Stay here," I said, gripping the doorknob so tightly my knuckles turned white. I stepped into the hallway. Nothing. But then I noticed something. Down the hall, near the staircase, the basement door was cracked open. I was sure it had been closed earlier. A sharp creaking noise echoed from below. The basement. Something was down there. I didn't want to go down there. Every instinct screamed at me to grab the kids and run, but my body wouldn't move. Instead, I stood frozen, staring at the basement door, my breath caught in my throat. Then, another noise. A soft shuffling sound. Someone was down there. I swallowed hard and slowly backed into the kids' room, locking the door behind me. "All right," I whispered, forcing a smile. "Just a creaky old house, right?" Ben didn't look convinced. Lily curled up under the blankets, clutching her stuffed bunny. I pulled out my phone and did what any normal person would. I texted my best friend Vanessa. "Me. The kids keep saying they see a clown. Also, I think I heard something in the basement." She replied almost instantly. "Vanessa. Okay, first of all, nope. Second, check the basement. It's probably just an old pipe or something." I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then the house alarm went off. A deafening, high-pitched wail filled the house. The kids screamed. I grabbed my phone and ran downstairs, heart pounding. The front door was locked. The windows were closed. But the basement door was wide open now. I slammed it shut and locked it. Then, silence. Too much silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. I turned around and felt my stomach drop. At the top of the staircase, reflected in the dim glow of the hallway light, stood a figure. Tall, unmoving, watching, and wearing a clown costume. I couldn't breathe. I blinked, and the figure was gone. No footsteps, no noise. Just gone. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. Me. "I think someone's in the house." "Vanessa." "What?" "Call the cops." I wanted to. I needed to. But something inside me hesitated. I forced myself up the stairs, my legs like lead. The hallway was empty, the kids' bedroom door still shut. Then my phone buzzed again, a text from Ben. "He's in the hallway again." I stopped breathing. Slowly, I turned my head toward the hallway. The air felt thicker, like something was there, watching, waiting. I reached for the doorknob. A creak, not from me, from behind me. I spun around. At the end of the hall, near the staircase, a pair of gloved hands gripped the railing. A pale face, a painted grin, cold, empty eyes staring right at me. He was real, and he wasn't imaginary. I couldn't scream. I wanted to. Every nerve in my body was telling me to run, to do something, but I just stood there frozen, staring at the thing at the end of the hallway. His painted grin stretched across his pale face, red smudges around his lips like old, dried blood. His oversized clown suit was torn and filthy, hanging off his lanky frame. And he wasn't moving. He just stood there, watching. Then, one slow step forward. The wooden floor creaked beneath his weight. That was enough to snap me out of it. I bolted into the kids' room, slamming the door shut and locking it. Ben and Lily were already crying, huddled together on the bed. "Shh, it's okay. It's okay," I whispered, though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "911, what's your emergency?" "There's someone in the house," I whispered. "I locked us in the bedroom, but he's here, he's inside." The operator's voice stayed calm. "Are you in a safe location?" I was about to say yes when, bang, something slammed against the door. Lily screamed. I pressed my hand over her mouth, my own heart hammering in my chest. Another bang. Then, silence. I held my breath, listening. The operator's voice crackled in my ear. "Stay on the line. Officers are on the way." Then the doorknob started to turn. I didn't know what to do. I threw myself against the door, pressing all my weight against it, praying the lock would hold. And then, a sound. Not a bang, not footsteps, but laughter. Slow, ragged, almost wheezing. I squeezed my eyes shut. Please let this be a nightmare. Then I noticed something. Ben, staring at my phone screen, his face pale as a ghost. I followed his gaze. The home security camera app was open. One of the cameras showed the basement, and in the dim, flickering light, I saw it. A nest, a pile of old blankets, rotting food, a dirty, deflated mattress. This man had been living inside the house. The door handle stopped turning. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, walking away. "He's leaving," Ben whispered. I held my breath, waiting. The house fell silent again, and then, bang. Not from our door. From downstairs. The front door. Sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The police were here. But when they entered the house, the clown was gone. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Even with the flashing red and blue lights cutting through the darkness, even with the sound of heavy boots storming through the house, I still felt him. Somewhere. Watching. I barely registered the officers shouting as they cleared each room. The door to the kids' bedroom flew open and a uniformed cop rushed in, gun drawn. "You're safe now," he said. "Come with me." I gathered Ben and Lily in my arms and followed him downstairs. The house was swarming with police, flashlights sweeping every corner. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. One officer turned to another, shaking his head. "Nothing. Back door was open. Looks like he ran." The words sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. He got away. I thought of his pale face, his lifeless eyes, the way he had just stood there, watching. "Come on," the officer urged, leading us outside. The cold air hit me like a slap. I hadn't even realized how suffocating the house had felt until I stepped out into the night. Mrs. and Mr. Robinson arrived minutes later, panic written all over their faces. Mrs. Robinson clutched Lily to her chest, while Mr. Robinson grilled the officers. "Who the hell was this guy?" he demanded. The police didn't have an answer yet. But as they searched the house, They did find something in the basement. I refused to go back inside, but I could see the officers emerging from the basement, their faces grim. One of them held up a dirty, old clown mask, the same one I had seen in the hallway. And then, a detective approached me. "We need to ask you a few questions," he said, his voice careful. I nodded, still in shock. "Looks like whoever this was had been staying here for a while," he continued. "We found food wrappers, a mattress, even some stolen clothes from the laundry room." I felt sick. He was living here?" I managed to say. The detective nodded. "Yeah, but that's not the worst part." He held out his phone, showing me a grainy security camera screenshot. My stomach dropped. The image showed my first night babysitting at the Robinsons' house, weeks ago. I was sitting on the couch watching TV, and behind me, barely visible in the shadows of the hallway, the clown. He had been watching me the entire time. I nearly collapsed. Ben tugged on my sleeve. "He's not coming back, right?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him everything was fine, but the truth was, I didn't know. You never think you're the kind of person who would freeze in fear. You imagine yourself as the one who would react fast, who would grab a weapon, call the cops, do something. But when it happens, when you realize you're not alone in your house, it's like your brain refuses to work. It started with a smell. I was home alone, recovering from ankle surgery, stuck in bed while my husband, David, worked late. It was day 3 of solitude, and the silence was starting to get to me. To distract myself, I had fallen into a routine, listening to true crime podcasts, scrolling through my phone, waiting for David to get home. That night, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I noticed something strange. A sharp synthetic smell, like cheap men's deodorant. It wasn't David's. He never used anything scented. At first, I thought maybe it was lingering from one of his work uniforms, but the more I inhaled, the stronger it got. It wasn't there before. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe the pain meds were messing with my senses, but deep down I already knew. Something was wrong. By the next morning, the smell had faded, but an uneasy feeling lingered. I hated how cluttered the house had become. Even with my ankle still healing, I needed to move around. Ignoring the doctor's advice, I grabbed my crutches and slowly made my way downstairs, careful not to put too much weight on my foot. The second I reached the bottom step, a cold draft brushed against my skin. I stopped. The back door, which David and I always kept locked, was open. A few inches, just enough for the night air to slip in. The trash bin, which we usually kept in front of the door, had been pushed aside. My heartbeat hammered in my chest. I limped toward the door, gripping my crutches tight. I peeked outside, expecting, I don't know, a person? Shadows? Nothing. The backyard was empty. The street beyond was silent. I grabbed my phone and texted David. "Did you leave the back door open?" No response. The wind pushed against the door, creaking it open another inch. And that's when I smelled it again, that same cheap deodorant. Somewhere behind me, a floorboard creaked. I stopped breathing. The sound was so faint that for a second I thought I imagined it. A slow, almost deliberate creak, like the weight of something shifting on old wood. It came from the living room. I turned my head slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. From where I stood in the kitchen, I could see the dimly lit space. Our couch, the coffee table, the TV mounted on the wall. Everything looked normal. But I wasn't looking at those things. My eyes locked onto the wardrobe in the corner of the room. An antique, heavy wooden piece. One of David's estate sale finds, the kind of thing that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. I had never liked it, and now standing there, my stomach twisted. The door was open just slightly. I knew it had been closed before. I gripped my phone, my fingers icy. Call 911. That was the logical thing to do. But my body wouldn't move. A part of me, The stupid, rational part kept trying to explain it away. Maybe the draft from the back door had pushed it open. Maybe it had always been like that, and I was just noticing now. And then, before I could make a decision, the door moved. A small, almost imperceptible shift, as if someone inside had just adjusted their position. I didn't have time to think. Before I could react, the wardrobe burst open. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black, lunged out. I screamed. He ran. For a split second I saw his face, a shadowed blur under the hood of his sweatshirt. Then he was moving, tearing through the living room toward the kitchen, toward me. The stench of that same cheap deodorant overwhelmed my senses as he passed. I stumbled back, nearly falling onto my bad ankle. My crutches clattered to the floor. My heart was slamming against my ribs, but all I could do was watch as he bolted straight for the back door. He knew exactly where to go. The door I had left open barely made a sound as he pushed through it and disappeared into the night. I stood there shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The house was silent again, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. Somehow my hands found my phone and I dialed. 911, what's your emergency? I could barely get the words out. There was a man in my house. The police arrived fast. Within 10 minutes, red and blue lights flooded my street, casting eerie flashes against the walls of my house. 2 officers, a man and a woman, stepped inside with their hands resting near their holsters, scanning every corner like they expected the man to still be there. I was still standing near the kitchen, gripping the counter so tightly my knuckles were white. My ankle throbbed, my heart wouldn't slow down, and I kept replaying the moment over and over in my head. The creak, the wardrobe door moving, the man rushing past me. The officers asked me the standard questions. Did I recognize him? No. Did he take anything? No. Was the door unlocked when I found it open? Yes. Was there any sign of forced entry? No. That's what made my stomach churn. Nothing was broken. No smashed windows, no damaged locks. And yet, he had been inside. One of the officers, Detective Graham, frowned and walked toward the back door, testing the lock. You're sure your husband didn't leave this open? I already texted him, I said, my voice hoarse. He never leaves it unlocked. David's car pulled into the driveway then, headlights washing over the front porch. The second he walked in and saw my face, he rushed over. What happened? He asked, his hands gripping my arms. There was someone in the house, I whispered. He was hiding in the wardrobe. David turned to the officers. Did he break in? Detective Graham exchanged a look with his partner before shaking his head. That's the thing. There's no sign of forced entry. David's brow furrowed. Then how the hell did he get in? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, and then, as if some distant alarm went off in my head, I turned toward the kitchen. The key rack. We kept a small wooden holder near the fridge where we hung our car keys, house keys, and an extra spare key for emergencies. I limped over, my heart slamming against my ribs. There were 3 hooks, 2 keys. The spare key was gone. I turned back to David, my stomach twisting. Someone took the key. His face paled. What? It was here. It's always here. I gripped the counter to steady myself. David, this wasn't his first time in the house. Silence. And then quietly, Detective Graham said the words I had been too afraid to say out loud. He's probably been coming in for a while. We changed the locks the next morning. A locksmith arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, replacing every external lock with new reinforced deadbolts. David also installed security cameras at the front and back doors, setting up notifications on his phone in case of motion detection. But none of it made me feel safe. Because here's the thing, when someone breaks into your house and steals your laptop or your jewelry, you feel violated, sure. But when someone breaks in and doesn't take anything, it's worse. Because it means they were never there for your stuff. They were there for you. I barely slept that night. Every small creak of the house settling made me jump. I kept staring at the security feeds on my phone, waiting to see his shadow moving at the edge of the cameras. But nothing ever showed up. The police never caught him. There were no fingerprints, no shoe prints outside. The security cameras, which we should have installed earlier, never captured his face. All we had was my description: tall, broad-shouldered, black hoodie, which could be anyone. And the worst part? I started wondering how long it had been going on. How many nights had I fallen asleep, completely unaware that someone had been standing in the dark just a few feet away? How many times had I been in the shower, listening to music, while he crept through the hallway? How many moments had I spent thinking I was alone, when I wasn't? And that smell, the sharp synthetic deodorant I had noticed the night before, had it really just appeared that evening? Or had he been in the house for days? Maybe he's still watching. Maybe he never left. Or maybe he's just waiting for the right moment and to come back. I've always been comfortable being alone. Some people find silence unsettling, but for me it was peaceful, especially on weekends when my dad traveled for work. The house felt like mine, and I could stay up late playing video games without anyone telling me to go to bed. That Friday night was no different. I had been gaming for hours, the glow of the screen the only light in the dark living room. Eventually my stomach growled, pulling me out of my trance. I paused the game, stretched, and made my way toward the kitchen. Then I saw it. The TV was off, its black screen reflecting the dimly lit room. But something moved. Just for a split second. A shadow, a flicker, too quick to be real. My chest tightened as I stood there, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Then came the sound. A soft scrape, like wood dragging against tile. I froze. The sound had come from the dining room. Slowly I stepped forward, my bare feet barely making a noise against the floor. I reached the doorway and peered inside. There, sitting at the dining table, was a woman. Her hair was tangled and matted, her clothes stained and disheveled. Her hands, dirty and trembling, moved slowly across the wooden surface of the table. She was whispering something, words I couldn't understand. My body locked in place, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then she looked up, and she smiled. "You've grown so much, my boy." My stomach lurched, my hands turned ice cold. I knew that voice, it was my mother, but that wasn't possible. I hadn't seen her in 7 years. She wasn't supposed to know where we lived. She wasn't supposed to be here. I couldn't move. She kept smiling, her fingers trailing over the wooden table like she was remembering something. "Your father never let me come back, but I knew you'd wait for me." Her voice was soft, almost affectionate, but something about it was wrong. Like a lullaby sung just a little off-key. My breath was shallow. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body refused to listen. That's when I saw it. Her hand, resting against the table, fingers curled around the handle of a knife. A cold, sharp terror shot through me, snapping me out of my paralysis. I turned and bolted down the hallway, slamming my bedroom door shut and locking it. My hands fumbled as I grabbed my phone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I called my dad first. The second he answered, I whispered, "She's here." His voice turned deadly serious. "Call the police. Right now. Do not open that door." I could hear her outside. Soft footsteps. Then the sound of her fingernails dragging along the wood. And then she started singing. It was an old lullaby. One she used to hum when I was little. My stomach twisted. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency? "There's a woman in my house," I whispered, barely able to speak. She broke in. She has a knife." The operator's voice was calm but firm. "Are you somewhere safe?" I locked myself in my room. The footsteps outside my door stopped. "What's your address?" I gave it to her, trying not to cry. Then my doorknob rattled. I pressed my back against the door, my whole body trembling, and then In a voice that was no longer soft, no longer sweet, she whispered, "I waited for you. Why won't you open the door?" Then came the sound of wood splintering. She was trying to break in, and the police were still 5 minutes away. The door shook violently. She was kicking it now, slamming her weight against the wood. Each impact sent a jolt of terror through me. I pressed my hands over my mouth, trying to keep my breathing silent. Where were the cops? Then, sirens. Flashing lights flickered through my bedroom window. The pounding on my door stopped. Then, her voice right outside. "No, no, they can't take you from me again." I heard footsteps, frantic and stumbling. The back door slammed open, then shouting. I barely processed what happened next. Heavy boots against the floor, orders being yelled, a struggle, a scream, then silence. I didn't move until a firm knock sounded at my door. "Police, you're safe now." I unlocked it with shaking hands. 2 officers stood there, faces unreadable. One of them asked if I was hurt. I shook my head, but inside I felt like I had been torn apart. Downstairs, they had her pinned, her wrists cuffed behind her back, her face twisted in something between fury and heartbreak. As they lifted her up, something fell from her pockets. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. Strands of hair, old newspaper clippings, pictures of me. Some were from years ago, others more recent. My breath caught. She'd been watching me. I don't know how long. As they led her outside, she suddenly stopped. Slowly, her head turned toward me. And then she smiled. "I just wanted to see you again." Her voice was almost loving. Then, just like that, she was gone. My dad got home the next morning. He hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Neither of us spoke about it much after that. She was taken to a psychiatric hospital. I never saw her again, but sometimes late at night I wake up for no reason at all. The house is quiet, and yet I swear I can still hear that lullaby. Faint, somewhere in the dark, like she's still waiting. You ever get that feeling that something's just off? Not in a big dramatic way, but in those tiny nagging details that don't sit right. A door slightly open when you know you closed it. A cup moved an inch from where you left it. A smell in the air that wasn't there before. That's how it started for me. After a rough breakup, I moved into a small apartment in Silver Lake, Los Angeles. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. A fresh start. I needed that. The place was quiet, my neighbors kept to themselves, and for the first time in months I could sleep without the weight of an argument pressing down on me. But then, weird things started happening. At first, it was small. A door slightly ajar, a charger missing from where I left it, a faint smell of perfume in the air, sickly sweet, something I'd never use. I chalked it up to stress, my brain playing tricks on me. Then one night I woke up. I wasn't sure why at first, but the air felt wrong. Heavy. Thick with that same perfume, stronger than ever. My body froze. I listened. Footsteps. Light. Deliberate inside my room. I lay there holding my breath, listening. The sound of soft steps against the wooden floor made my heart hammer against my ribs. I forced myself to turn my head slightly. My room was dark, but not pitch black. The glow from a street lamp outside gave just enough light to cast faint shadows across the floor. Nothing. I was alone. Still, the scent lingered stronger than before. A wave of nausea crept in and my skin prickled with unease. I sat up, flicked on the lamp, and scanned the room. Closet door, closed. Bedroom door, closed. Windows, locked. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe the stress was messing with my head. But then, in the bathroom, I noticed something strange. My toothbrush was wet. I hadn't used it yet that day. I stood there staring at the toothbrush like it was some kind of cursed object. My mind raced, searching for a logical explanation. Maybe I absent-mindedly used it earlier. Maybe there was a leak from the sink, but deep down, I knew neither was true. Over the next few days, the little things kept adding up. Drawers left open when I knew I had closed them. My phone charger moved from the nightstand to the kitchen counter. A faint indentation on my bed, like someone had been sitting there. The smell of perfume, it wasn't random anymore. It came at specific times. Late at night or right when I got home from work, like a presence that lingered waiting. I even started to feel watched. That eerie, skin-crawling sensation of unseen eyes following you. I caught myself checking the peephole every time I walked past my front door, expecting to see someone standing there. At work, I made a joke about my haunted apartment. My coworker, Aaron, laughed it off, but I saw the way his expression shifted when I told him about the perfume. "You sure you live alone, man?" he asked. I forced a chuckle. "Yeah, pretty sure." I wasn't. Not anymore. That night, I double-checked everything. Locked the doors, checked the windows, even put my desk chair against the closet door, just in case. Then, I tried to sleep. Somewhere in the early hours of the morning, I woke up. The room was ice cold. My skin prickled as the heavy scent of perfume filled my nostrils. My heart pounded as I realized this wasn't normal. Then I heard it, a faint shuffling noise. My breath caught in my throat. The sound was so quiet, like someone trying to move without being heard. It came from the foot of my bed. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body was locked in place. I stared into the darkness, praying my eyes wouldn't adjust. Then something touched my face. A cold, gentle hand brushed my cheek. That was it. I exploded out of bed, hitting the light switch so fast I almost ripped it off the wall. My vision blurred from adrenaline, my chest heaving. And then I saw her. A woman. She was kneeling beside my bed, wearing one of my shirts, staring up at me with a slow, eerie smile. And she whispered my name. I stumbled backward so fast I nearly tripped over myself. My heart was pounding in my ears, my breath coming in sharp gasps. She didn't move, just knelt there, her hands resting on her thighs, her head tilted slightly, like I was the crazy one. "Daniel," she whispered again, smiling. "You don't have to be scared, we can finally be together now." I bolted for my phone, snatching it off the nightstand with shaking hands. "Who the hell are you?" I shouted, backing toward the door. Her smile faltered, and for the first time she looked hurt. "Daniel," she said, softer this time, like she couldn't believe I was reacting this way. "I've been here this whole time. You just didn't notice." A chill ran down my spine. This whole time? I dialed 911, my voice barely working as I told the operator someone had broken into my apartment. As I did, she stood up, slowly, deliberately. "You don't have to do that," she murmured. But I did. And when the police arrived minutes later, she didn't even fight. She just sat on the bed, hands folded neatly in her lap, watching me as if I had betrayed her. What they found next was worse than anything I could have imagined. The officers searched the apartment while one of them took my statement. But it was in my closet that they made the most disturbing discovery. Hidden behind a stack of boxes, they found a small sleeping area, a blanket, a pillow, even a pile of my clothes that she had apparently been wearing. In the bathroom, they found her toothbrush, her underwear, her makeup. And in the closet, tucked away like a twisted secret, they found a journal. It was filled with pages and pages about me. Details of my routines, my habits, my conversations with her that never actually happened. It was like reading the diary of someone living in a completely different reality. One where we had been in love for months, where I had invited her in, where she had been waiting for the right time to finally reveal herself. The officers identified her as Veronica Hale, one of my neighbors from down the hall, a woman I had barely spoken to beyond the occasional nod in the hallway. She had been slipping in and out of my apartment for weeks, waiting for me to leave, then sneaking back in, living in the shadows of my home. I packed a bag that night and left. I never went back. I moved to a new city, a new apartment, changed my locks 3 times over. But no matter how secure my place is now, No matter how many times I check the doors before bed, I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, heart pounding, the faintest trace of sweet perfume lingering in the air, and for just a second, just long enough to make my stomach drop, I swear I hear someone whisper my name. I never order anything late at night, ever. So when I heard a knock on my apartment door at 11:30 p.m., my stomach dropped. I live alone in Brooklyn, New York, in a small but cozy apartment. It's not the safest neighborhood, but I keep my doors locked, my windows shut, and my pepper spray by the nightstand. I'm careful. That night it was raining. The sound of droplets against the windows mixed with the soft hum of my laptop. I was finishing up a project when the knock came again. Louder this time. I froze. My heart started pounding. Who delivers anything at this hour? Slowly, I tiptoed to the door and peeked through the peephole. A delivery guy stood outside, holding a package in one hand and a tablet in the other. His uniform was generic. Gray jacket, black cap, no visible logo. I didn't order anything, still I didn't want to be rude. "Who is it?" I called through the door. "Delivery for Sophia Bennett. Need your signature." Something was off. His voice sounded tense, like he was forcing himself to sound professional. I hesitated. "Who's it from?" A pause. Says it's from Amazon." I knew that was a lie. I had checked my orders earlier. Nothing was scheduled. A chill ran down my spine. This was wrong. I checked my phone, pretending to scroll through emails. No missed deliveries. No notifications. "I didn't order anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. A long silence. Then, in a frustrated tone, he said, "Look, I just need your signature. I can't leave without it." I stared at the peephole. He wasn't looking at the camera above my door. He was avoiding it. "I'm not opening the door," I said, louder this time. He stepped closer. "Just sign. It'll take 2 seconds." My body stiffened. My fight or flight instincts kicked in. "If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." For the first time, he looked up at the camera, and then he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not an embarrassed one. A knowing smile. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the dimly lit hallway. I stood there, heart racing, gripping my phone. I had a terrible feeling he'd be back. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the scene in my head. His insistence, his eerie smile, the way he avoided looking at the camera. By morning, I needed answers. I checked my building's security footage through the tenant portal. The clip showed exactly what I saw. A man in a gray jacket standing at my door with a package. But then I noticed something. He never knocked on any other doors. If this was a real delivery, why was I the only one he tried? A sinking feeling settled in my chest. I went straight to Facebook and checked my neighborhood group. And that's when I saw it. Multiple posts about a fake delivery scam. Women in Williamsburg and Greenpoint reported the same thing. A man pretending to be from a delivery service, showing up late at night, insisting on signatures. In some cases, he even forced his way inside. I felt sick. One of the posts mentioned that these guys often come back, sometimes in different disguises, sometimes waiting for the right moment. I stared at my locked door. What if he wasn't done yet? That night I double-checked everything. Windows locked, door bolted, pepper spray within reach. Then at 11:32 p.m. I heard it. A soft scratching at my door. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone and pulled up my security feed. The camera's night vision flickered on, and there he was. Not in a delivery uniform this time. No package. Just standing there, testing my door handle. I couldn't breathe. I immediately called 911. My voice was barely steady as I whispered into the phone. "There's a man at my door trying to get in. He was here last night too." The dispatcher assured me officers were on the way, but it felt like forever. Then the man looked up at the camera again. He must have realized I was watching because he suddenly bolted down the hallway. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They took my statement and said they'd patrol the area, but there wasn't much else they could do. As they left, one officer turned to me. "Be careful. Guys like this don't just stop." And I knew. This wasn't over yet. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated but picked up. "Miss Bennett? This is Officer Reynolds from last night." My stomach clenched. "Did you find him?" There was a pause. Then he said, "We got him." I sank onto my couch, relief washing over me. Turns out, after leaving my building, he tried the same thing at another apartment in Queens. But this time, the woman inside wasn't just watching. She had already called the cops. They caught him trying to force his way in. When they searched him, they found a set of lockpicking tools, a knife, and multiple fake delivery uniforms. And the worst part? "He's done this before," the officer continued. "Multiple break-ins. Some didn't end well." A chill ran down my spine. I didn't need to ask what he meant. That night, as I locked my door, I thought about what could have happened if I had opened it. If I had signed whatever fake document he was carrying. If I had let my guard down. From then on, I never answered the door at night, because if I had made the wrong choice, I might not be here to tell this story.